The first thing you must understand about respect is that it cannot be demanded into existence. You can demand attention, you can raise your voice, you can threaten consequences, but none of these things create genuine respect. Respect begins much earlier in the quiet decisions you make when nobody is watching. It begins with what you tolerate, what you refuse, and how willing you are to abandon your own standards simply to remain accepted. People are constantly observing these signals, often without realizing it. They notice whether you desperately seek approval, whether you apologize for every decision, whether you allow others to interrupt you, and whether you become uncomfortable when someone disagrees with you. Before people respect your words, they are already judging the relationship you have with yourself. This is why self-respect is not some abstract idea reserved for motivational speeches. It is a psychological signal. When you genuinely value your time, your attention, your principles, and your dignity, other people begin to understand that access to you has value. You don't have to announce it. You don't have to tell everyone, respect me. Your behavior communicates it before your mouth ever does. Think about the person who constantly tries to be liked. They agree with everyone, they laugh at jokes they don't find funny, they accept invitations they don't want, they say yes when they mean no, they explain every decision because they are terrified someone might misunderstand them. At first, they may believe they are being kind, but over time something changes. People begin to assume their boundaries are flexible. They begin expecting their availability. They begin taking their kindness for granted. Now consider someone different. This person is polite, but they are not desperate. They listen, but they don't automatically agree. They can say no without creating a dramatic explanation. They can disagree without becoming hostile. They don't need everyone in the room to approve of them. Their calmness communicates something powerful. I know who I am, and I don't need your permission to remain that person. That is where respect begins. The interesting thing about human psychology is that people often value what appears to have standards. If you are available to everyone at every moment, your attention becomes ordinary. If you give your approval to everyone, your approval loses meaning. But when your time, attention, and trust are guided by principles, people begin to recognize that these things cannot simply be demanded from you. This does not mean becoming arrogant or treating people as inferior. That is not self-respect. That is insecurity wearing expensive clothing. Real self-respect is quiet. It does not need to dominate a room. It does not need to humiliate anyone. It simply refuses to betray itself for acceptance. There will be moments when someone dislikes your decision. Let them. There will be moments when someone misunderstands your boundary. Let them. There will be moments when saying no makes you feel guilty. Say no anyway when no is the honest answer. Because every time you abandon your own standards to make someone else comfortable, you teach yourself that their approval matters more than your integrity. And people notice this. They may not consciously analyze it, but they feel it. They sense desperation. They sense uncertainty. They sense when someone is performing confidence rather than possessing it. That is why trying to look powerful often produces the opposite result. You don't need to convince people that you are important. You need to become so grounded in your own standards that their opinion stops determining your behavior. Imagine someone walking into a room desperately trying to appear important. They speak louder than necessary. They constantly mention their achievements. They interrupt others. They need to be noticed. Now imagine another person entering quietly. They observe, they listen. When they speak, their words have purpose. They don't compete for attention. They don't need to prove themselves. Which person creates more curiosity? Usually the second, because confidence does not announce itself every second. It simply exists. This is why the psychology of instant respect begins with removing the behaviors that silently communicate insecurity. Stop over-explaining. Stop apologizing for reasonable boundaries. Stop chasing people who repeatedly dismiss you. Stop changing your personality to fit every room. Stop measuring your worth by how quickly someone approves of you. Instead, become selective. Be selective with your words, selective with your time, selective with your trust, selective with your attention. Not because you believe you are better than others, but because you finally understand that your life has limited resources. Your attention is one of them. Your energy is another. Your time is perhaps the most valuable of all. Give them deliberately. When you do, something subtle happens. You stop appearing desperate to be respected because your behavior already demonstrates that you respect yourself. And that becomes the foundation for everything that follows. When you know your own value, you no longer need to chase respect. You begin to command it naturally. Once you stop chasing respect, The next thing people notice is how you carry yourself when you are not trying to be noticed. There is a strange psychological power in a person who does not rush to fill every silence. Most people speak because they are uncomfortable with silence. They explain because they are afraid of being misunderstood. They interrupt because they are afraid their importance will disappear if someone else takes the attention. But when you learn to observe more and speak with intention, something changes in the way people perceive you. Your presence becomes heavier, your words become more valuable. You begin creating authority without asking anyone to give it to you. Think about the difference between someone who talks constantly and someone who carefully chooses when to speak. The first person may have intelligence, but because they reveal everything immediately, others quickly understand their patterns. They explain their motives. They reveal their insecurities. They respond to every comment. They give opinions on everything. The second person listens. They watch. They notice how people behave when they think nobody is paying attention. They notice who interrupts whom, who seeks approval, who becomes nervous when challenged, who changes their personality depending on the room. This kind of observation creates psychological awareness, and awareness creates power. You cannot understand people if you are constantly trying to impress them. You cannot read a room if you are desperate to control the conversation. You cannot recognize manipulation if you are too busy defending yourself. That is why speaking less is not about becoming mysterious for the sake of appearance. It is about becoming more conscious of what you reveal and why you reveal it. Every word carries information. When you complain constantly, people learn what frustrates you. When you boast constantly, people learn what you need validation for. When you explain every decision, people learn where you feel insecure. When you react immediately, people learn which buttons they can press. But when you pause, observe, and choose your response carefully, you reveal far less. This creates a different kind of presence. Imagine someone insults you in front of a group. Most people immediately react. They defend themselves. They raise their voice. They try to win the moment. But imagine simply looking at the person calmly and saying what is necessary without anger, without rushing, without needing the room to applaud you. The psychological effect is powerful. You demonstrate that your emotional state does not belong to the person who provoked you. That is authority, not volume, not aggression control. People instinctively pay attention to individuals who appear comfortable with themselves. This is why silence can sometimes communicate more confidence than a long explanation. Suppose someone misunderstands your decision. You could spend 10 minutes explaining every detail, or you could say calmly, "That's your interpretation," and continue with your life. The second response communicates something important. You are not terrified of being misunderstood. That does not mean you never clarify yourself. It means you understand that not everyone deserves unlimited access to your reasoning. There is another advantage to observing more. You begin seeing patterns. People eventually reveal themselves through repetition. The person who constantly talks about loyalty may betray others. The person who constantly criticizes everyone may fear criticism themselves. The person who demands respect may not know how to give it. The person who constantly seeks attention may be deeply uncomfortable with being ignored. If you speak less, you give people more opportunities to reveal these patterns. And once you see the pattern, you no longer need to guess. This is where psychological intelligence becomes useful. You stop judging people by their promises. You start studying their behavior. You stop being impressed by confidence. You look for consistency. You stop listening only to what people say. You watch what they repeatedly do. That shift makes you harder to manipulate. And people respect those who are difficult to manipulate. But there is an important distinction. Do not become silent because you are afraid. Do not withdraw because you lack confidence. Silence should come from choice, not insecurity. Speak when your words matter. Challenge something when your principles require it. Defend someone when your values demand it. But stop speaking simply to prove that you belong. Stop explaining yourself just because someone looks confused. Stop filling every quiet moment because you are afraid people might forget you exist. Your presence does not become weaker when you stop talking. Sometimes it becomes stronger. A person who speaks constantly gives people their attention for free. A person who speaks deliberately makes people listen when they finally choose to speak. This is why the psychology of instant respect is deeply connected to restraint. When people realize that you are watching, thinking, and choosing rather than reacting automatically, they begin treating your words differently. Your silence creates space. Your observation creates awareness. Your deliberate speech creates authority. And when you combine that with genuine self-respect, you no longer need to demand attention. Your presence naturally makes people pay attention. The first real test of respect does not happen when people praise you. It happens when someone crosses a boundary and waits to see what you will do about it. This is where most people lose the respect they thought they had earned. They speak confidently about their standards, but the moment someone challenges them, they become emotional, uncertain, or desperate to keep the relationship comfortable. Respect is not created by announcing your boundaries. It is created when people discover that your boundaries have consequences. You do not need to threaten anyone. You do not need to become aggressive. You simply need to respond consistently the first time someone tests your limits. When people learn that your words and actions match, they begin to understand that you are not someone whose standards can be negotiated away. Think about the first time someone interrupts you repeatedly. Maybe you are speaking and they talk over you. You laugh it off. Then they do it again and again. Eventually, they learn something. They learn that interrupting you has no consequence. The same principle applies to disrespect. A person makes a small insulting comment. You ignore it. They make another. You smile nervously. Soon the comments become normal. This is how disrespect grows. Rarely does it begin with something dramatic. It usually begins with a small test, a late arrival, a broken promise, an unnecessary insult, a demand disguised as a favor, a boundary crossed just enough to see whether you will respond. People are constantly learning what they can get away with. That does not make every person manipulative, but it does mean your behavior teaches people how to interact with you. If you consistently tolerate something, they may assume it is acceptable. If you calmly correct it, they learn there is a limit. This is why the first response matters. Not because you need to create conflict, but because you are establishing the rules of the relationship. Imagine a door with a lock. If the lock works every time, people understand that the door is secure. But if sometimes it is locked and sometimes it opens whenever someone pushes hard enough, people will keep testing it. Your boundaries are the same. They must work consistently. If you say, I don't accept being spoken to that way, but continue engaging in the same conversation while the disrespect continues, your words become weaker. Instead, calmly end the conversation, step away, channel the subject if appropriate, guide distance when necessary. The consequence does not have to be dramatic. It only has to be real. This is where emotional control becomes essential. Because when someone crosses your boundary, they may expect anger, they may expect you to lose control, they may even provoke you further because anger makes you easier to manipulate. But imagine responding differently. You look at them, you pause. You speak calmly, don't speak to me that way. Then you stop. No long speech, no insult, no emotional performance. The power comes from the fact that you are completely prepared to follow through. That is what people remember, not the volume of your voice. The certainty behind it. There is a psychological difference between aggression and authority. Aggression tries to force people through fear. Authority communicates standards through consistency. Aggressive people often need everyone to know they are powerful. Secure people rarely need to prove it. Their behavior is enough. This is why respect becomes stronger when your reactions become calmer. If someone knows they can make you furious, they possess a psychological button. If they know that crossing your boundary simply results in reduced access to you, they have far less control. Your response becomes predictable, and that predictability creates clarity. People know where you stand. They know what you accept. They know what happens when they cross the line. This is especially important in relationships, friends, coworkers, partners, family, even strangers. You cannot control how people behave, but you can control what you continue to participate in. That distinction is incredibly powerful. You are not responsible for forcing everyone to respect you. You're responsible for deciding what happens after they don't. That is the foundation of strong boundaries. And there is another lesson here. Never threaten a consequence you are unwilling to enforce. Threats reveal insecurity. If you tell someone you will leave and then remain, they learn that your words are negotiable. If you say you will stop giving your time and then continue, they learn that your boundaries are temporary. Say less, do more, let your actions complete the sentence. This is where instant respect begins to emerge. People may not agree with your boundaries. They may even become angry because of them. But disagreement is not disrespect. Someone is allowed to dislike your standards. They are not entitled to control them. You do not need everyone to approve of your boundaries. You only need enough self-respect to maintain them. When you consistently demonstrate that your time, attention, and dignity have limits, people begin adjusting their behavior around you. They understand that access to you is not automatic. Trust must be earned. Respect must be mutual. And your presence is valuable enough to protect. That is the psychological foundation of commanding respect. Asterisk, set the boundary once, enforce it calmly, and let your actions prove that your standards are not negotiable. There is a moment when someone tries to provoke you, and in that moment, you are given a choice that most people do not recognize. You can react immediately and give that person control over your emotional state, or you can pause, observe, and choose your response. That pause is where power begins. People often believe respect comes from being intimidating, speaking loudly, or proving that nobody can challenge them. But genuine respect comes from something much harder to fake, emotional control. When people discover that insults, criticism, pressure, and attempts to embarrass you cannot easily disturb your inner state, they become more careful with how they approach you. You become difficult to manipulate because your emotions are no longer available as weapons. Think about how easy it is to control someone who reacts instantly. Say something insulting, they become angry, eyeing them, they become desperate, challenge their opinion, they start defending themselves, give them criticism. They immediately explain why you are wrong. You've discovered their buttons. And once someone knows your buttons, they know how to influence you. This is why emotional control is not simply about staying calm. It is about refusing to surrender your decision-making to the person standing in front of you. Imagine someone throws a stone into a quiet lake. The water reacts immediately. Ripples spread across the entire surface. But eventually, the water becomes still again. Now imagine a lake that never settles. Every small stone creates chaos. Every passing disturbance changes the entire surface. That is how an emotionally reactive person lives. Every comment changes their mood. Every criticism changes their confidence. Every rejection changes their sense of worth. Every insult becomes a personal battle. They are constantly responding to the outside world. The emotionally disciplined person is different. They still feel emotions. They are not emotionless. They simply create space between feeling and action. Someone insults them, they feel the emotion, but they do not immediately obey it. They pause, they ask themselves, what response actually benefits me? That question can change everything, because sometimes the strongest response is no response. Sometimes the strongest response is a calm sentence. Sometimes it is leaving. Sometimes it is correcting the behavior. The important thing is that you choose. You are not being controlled by the impulse. This is where people often misunderstand strength. They think emotional control means allowing others to disrespect you. It does not. You can be firm without being furious. You can say no without shouting. You can leave without slamming the door. You can disagree without insulting someone. You can defend yourself without becoming the kind of person you are defending yourself against. That is a higher form of power. Consider what happens when someone tries to provoke you in front of others. They expect a reaction. Perhaps they want you to become angry so everyone focuses on your reaction instead of their behavior. If you lose control, the situation changes. Suddenly people are discussing your anger, your message disappears. But if you remain composed, their attempt becomes obvious. You do not have to expose them. Their behavior exposes itself. This is why calmness can be psychologically disarming. People cannot easily predict someone who does not react according to expectation. If they insult you and you explode, they know what works. If they insult you and you remain calm, they have to reconsider. If they criticize you and you immediately defend yourself, they know you are emotionally attached to their opinion. But if you listen and simply say, I'll consider it, you demonstrate independence. You are not accepting the criticism. You are not rejecting it emotionally. You are evaluating it. That is maturity, and it creates respect, because people recognize the difference between someone who is controlled by emotion and someone who controls their response to emotion. The goal is not to become cold. The goal is to become difficult to destabilize. There will always be people who want to test you. Some will criticize you. Some will misunderstand you. Some will deliberately provoke you. You cannot eliminate these people from the world, but you can eliminate their access to your emotional controls. And once you do that, something changes inside you. You stop entering every argument. You stop proving yourself to everyone. You stop allowing one person's opinion to destroy your entire day. You stop reacting to every message, every comment, every insult. You become selective. your attention becomes valuable. Your reactions become deliberate. Your emotions become information rather than commands. That is the kind of presence people respect, because when others realize they cannot easily make you angry, afraid, desperate, or insecure, they understand that your mind belongs to you. And when you control your emotions instead of allowing other people to control them for you, respect stops being something you demand and becomes something your presence naturally commands. People often believe respect comes from being impressive, intimidating, or constantly proving their worth. But there is another kind of power that works much deeper. It comes from becoming genuinely valuable. When you stop desperately trying to make people like you and start developing qualities that make your presence useful, reliable, and difficult to replace, people begin responding to you differently. You no longer have to ask for attention because your competence naturally attracts it. You no longer have to demand respect because your discipline, knowledge, and character begin speaking for you. Look at the difference between someone who constantly tells people how capable they are and someone who simply produces results. The first person talks about what they can do. The second person does it. The first person seeks recognition. The second person creates evidence, and people trust evidence more than promises. This is why becoming valuable is one of the strongest ways to earn respect. Value does not mean being useful to everyone or allowing people to exploit your kindness. It means developing qualities that make you stronger, more capable, and more independent. Learn something deeply, become excellent at something. Keep your promises, control your emotions, solve problems instead of creating them. Be disciplined when nobody is watching. These qualities create a reputation that cannot be built through words alone. Imagine two people entering the same room. One immediately tries to impress everyone. They tell stories about their success, mention important people they know, and constantly look around to see who is paying attention. The other person listens carefully. They understand the situation. When a problem appears, they offer a practical solution. They do not need to announce their competence because their actions demonstrate it. Who will people remember? Usually the second person, because real value creates gravity. It makes people naturally pay attention. This is also why desperation destroys respect. When you desperately need people to like you, you become willing to compromise almost anything. You agree too quickly. You offer too much. You chase conversations. You tolerate disrespect. You become afraid to disappoint people. And eventually, the desire to be liked becomes stronger than your desire to maintain your standards. But when you have your own purpose, your own goals, and your own direction, you become less dependent on approval. You can be liked without needing to be liked. That difference is enormous. You can walk into a room and appreciate people's opinions without allowing those opinions to define you. You can receive criticism without collapsing. You can receive praise without becoming addicted to it. You can help others without needing them to constantly thank you. That is emotional independence. And emotional independence creates presence. Think about someone who is deeply committed to their craft. They spend years learning, they make mistakes, they improve, they become disciplined. Eventually, people begin coming to them for answers, not because they demanded authority, but because they earned it. This is the kind of respect that lasts. Anyone can create fear temporarily. Anyone can create attention through controversy. Anyone can demand obedience through aggression. But competence creates something more durable, trust. And trust becomes the foundation of genuine respect. This is why you should spend less time asking, how can I make people respect me? And more time asking, what can I become that naturally deserves respect? That question changes your entire strategy. Instead of chasing popularity, build character. Instead of chasing attention, build skill. Instead of chasing approval, build discipline. Instead of trying to appear powerful, become capable. The difference between appearance and substance eventually becomes obvious. You can imitate confidence for a few minutes. You can pretend to be intelligent for a conversation. You can act disciplined for a day, but you cannot fake character indefinitely. People eventually observe patterns. They see whether your promises match your actions. They see whether you remain calm under pressure. They see whether you keep your word when there is nothing to gain. They see whether you become arrogant when you succeed. These moments determine your reputation. And reputation is one of the most powerful forms of social influence. When people know you are reliable, your words carry more weight. When people know you are competent, your opinions receive more attention. When people know you have standards, Your boundaries are taken more seriously. When people know you do not need their approval, they become more curious about you. This is the paradox. The less desperately you chase respect, the more naturally it comes towards you. You do not need to be the loudest person in the room. You need to become the person whose presence adds something valuable to the room. That value can come from knowledge, from discipline, from courage, from emotional stability, from leadership, from creativity, from wisdom, from the ability to remain calm when everyone else is losing control. Build these qualities quietly. Do not announce every improvement. Let people discover the difference themselves, because the strongest reputation is not the one you advertise. It is the one other people eventually describe when you are not there, and when your competence, discipline, character, and purpose become stronger than your need to be liked. Respect stops being something you chase and becomes the natural result of the person you have deliberately chosen to become. There is a final lesson about respect that most people learn only after wasting years trying to convince others of their value. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is leave, not dramatically, not with threats, not with a final speech designed to make someone regret losing you. Simply leave when the pattern has become clear, because respect reaches its highest level when people understand that your presence is a privilege, not something they can repeatedly abuse without consequence. You can have self-respect, you can speak less, you can set boundaries, you can control your emotions, you can become highly valuable, but eventually someone may still choose to disrespect you. That is where your final test begins. What do you do when someone refuses to change? Most people negotiate, they explain, they argue, they give another chance. Then another and another. They become trapped in the hope that if they communicate their feelings perfectly, the other person will suddenly understand. But sometimes people understand perfectly. They simply do not care. That distinction is important. Not every person who disrespects you is confused. Some people are testing how much they can get away with. Others have become comfortable because you have repeatedly tolerated their behavior. And some simply do not value the relationship enough to change. You cannot force respect into someone. You can only decide whether they continue having access to you. This is why walking away is not weakness. It is the ultimate consequence. Imagine a person repeatedly enters your house, makes a mess, insults you, and ignores every request to stop. You could spend hours explaining why their behavior is unacceptable, or you could simply stop opening the door. The second decision communicates more than the first. It says your boundary is real, your time is valuable, your peace has limits, and your presence is not guaranteed. This does not mean you should abandon every relationship at the first disagreement. Healthy relationships require patience. People make mistakes. People misunderstand each other. People sometimes say things they regret. The difference is what happens afterward. A respectful person listens. They take responsibility. They make an effort to improve. A toxic pattern is different. The same behavior repeats. The same apology appears. The same excuse follows. The same disrespect returns. When the pattern becomes predictable, stop judging the relationship by promises. Judge it by behavior. This is where emotional maturity becomes essential. You do not need to hate someone to leave them. You do not need revenge. You do not need to destroy their reputation. You do not even need them to admit that they were wrong. You simply need to accept reality. Sometimes closure does not come from another person's explanation. It comes from your decision to stop participating. And that decision can be remarkably quiet. You stop responding immediately. You stop initiating every conversation. You stop making yourself available to someone who repeatedly disrespects your time. You stop explaining your boundaries. You stop trying to prove that you deserve better. You simply behave as though your standards are real. At first, some people may test you. They may suddenly become nicer. They may ask why you have changed. They may accuse you of being arrogant. They may say you have become distant. This is where many people become uncertain. They begin feeling guilty. They start explaining. They reopen the door, and the old pattern returns. Do not confuse someone's discomfort with your wrongdoing. When you change the rules of access to you, people who benefited from your lack of boundaries may naturally resist. That resistance does not mean you are wrong. It may simply mean the old arrangement benefited them. The person who once had unlimited access to your attention may become frustrated when you become selective. The person who could insult you without consequence may become angry when you walk away. The person who relied on your constant approval may suddenly accuse you of changing. You did change. That is the point. You became more conscious of your value. You stopped allowing every person to determine your emotional state. You stopped treating disrespect as something you had to endure to maintain a relationship. And this is where all the previous lessons come together. Self-respect taught you to stop chasing approval. Silence taught you to observe before reacting. Boundaries taught you to make your standards clear. Emotional control taught you not to surrender your power during conflict. Value taught you to build a life that does not depend on being liked. Now, walking away gives all of those qualities a final purpose. It protects everything you have built, because there is no point developing inner strength if you continue giving unlimited access to people who repeatedly destroy your peace. The goal is not to make everyone respect you. That is impossible. The goal is to become someone who respects himself enough to stop negotiating with disrespect. And when you reach that point, something changes. You stop fearing rejection. You stop fearing being alone. You stop believing that losing someone automatically means losing something valuable. Sometimes losing access to you is exactly what someone needs to experience after repeatedly failing to appreciate it. Walk away calmly. Leave without revenge. Keep your dignity. Keep building, because when you no longer need to convince people of your worth, your presence becomes powerful, and the people who truly deserve access to you will never require you to sacrifice your self-respect to keep them.